Hello, everyone. My name is Ted, and I'm a teacher here at PYD. Today, in this session, we are going to be talking about relative clauses, identifying and non-identifying adjective and adverb clauses. Okay. So if you remember what we talked about in a previous session, we talked about dependent and independent clauses. And if you can remember back to that session, it will help you as we go through this session. Now, what is a relative clause? A clause is part of a sentence that has its own subject and verb. Now, a subject is a noun or a pronoun. It's usually at the beginning or near the beginning of a sentence. And it is the thing or person that is doing the action in the sentence. The verb describes the action that is being done in the sentence. So if I said something like, Mohammed drove to town, Mohammed is the subject, drove is the verb. And of course, town is the object, but we're not talking about objects today. A relative clause is a dependent clause that forms a complex sentence together with an independent clause. Okay, so just to jog our memory here, an independent clause is basically a short sentence. It can exist on its own. A dependent clause is part of a sentence that cannot exist on its own. So we need to keep that straight as we're going through this session. Okay, so what is a relative clause? What is a relative clause? It's an identifying or restrictive clause, and it gives necessary or important information about a common noun. Okay? So it's information that you cannot do without. It's information that the sentence will not make sense without. Okay. Now, a non-identifying or non-restrictive clause gives extra information about a common or proper noun. Okay. So, just to review right quick, an identifying restrictive clause gives information only about a common noun. A non-identifying or non-restrictive clause gives extra information about either a common or a proper noun. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what common and proper nouns are. Okay, we have a review here of common and proper nouns. There are two types of nouns, common nouns and proper nouns. Proper nouns are names like Ali, Mount Everest, the Pacific Ocean, Khobar, or Arabic. They are always capitalized. So please make sure that you always capitalize a proper noun. Common nouns are everything else, such as a man, a mountain, ocean, city, or language. Now, they can also be abstract things like ideas. They can be things like liberty or justice or freedom. Those are nouns as well. So if you ever have any doubts about what a noun is, ask yourself, is this something I can see, something I can touch, something I can feel, or something that I can have? Because something like freedom or liberty or justice, you can't see them or touch them, really. They are what we call abstract concepts, but you can have them. You certainly know if you have freedom. You certainly know if you have justice. Proper nouns are essentially names of things, though, right? And we always capitalize proper nouns. Okay? Okay, so if it describes a proper noun, it isn't an identifying clause. Okay. So if you have a clause and it describes a proper noun, the name of someone or the name of something, it isn't an identifying clause. So here's an example. Miss Tora, who is from California, loves going to the beach. This is what is called a non-identifying or non-restrictive clause because we already know who we're discussing, in this case, Miss Tora. And the information about where she's from is not needed in the sentence. So you could just as easily say, Miss Tora loves going to the beach. So question, why would you say Miss Tora, who is from California, loves going to the beach? Well, it gives you added information in the sentence and makes your sentence interesting. That's one of the whole points of writing, is to write an interesting piece of written work. If your writing is not interesting, then no one is going to want to listen to or read what you have said. You must try to make your writing interesting so that people will want to read it. Also, it's better to have more information. It's descriptive. Miss Tora is from California. Now, suppose you meet Miss Tora. Well, now you have something to talk with her about. You can ask her about California. Okay? You don't just have to talk to her about going to the beach. You can talk to her about other things in California. Okay? So, clauses help sentences to be more interesting. Identifying clauses describe common nouns. They are necessary or important to the sentence. Okay, so here's an example. My teacher, who is from California, likes beaches more than my teacher, who is from Pakistan. These are both identifying or restrictive clauses because they identify which teachers we are discussing. They are necessary to the sentence. If we take them out, the sentence no longer makes sense. It would say, my teacher likes beaches more than my teacher. Well, you know, which teacher are we talking about? You know, you need these clauses which describe common nouns, the common noun in this case being teacher, to help you understand which teacher you're talking about. As you can see, if you did not have these identifying clauses, you wouldn't know which teacher that we are talking about. Okay, here's another example. That neuroscientist wrote a book that was about how the brain works. Okay, so in this case, book is a common noun. It's not named, so therefore it's common. It's a common noun and not a proper noun. Okay. This is a identifying or restrictive clause because it gives us information that is important in the sentence. Taking the clause out leaves a complete sentence, but because the point of the sentence is the topic of the book, how the brain works, we consider it an identifying clause. So you could just say, that neuroscientist wrote a book. That's a complete sentence. Everyone can understand what you're saying. But don't you think it's better to say, or to add, that was about how the brain works? Because look, this neuroscientist could have written a cookbook. He could have written a math book. He could have written a chemistry book. So it is good to explain what you mean by book in this sentence. It's about how the brain works. So that's why we use a clause here. Relative clauses start with a relative pronoun or with where, when, or whose. Okay? So I actually made a little list of relative pronouns. Let me just share it with you right quick. You'll see these come up throughout the session. Some that we've already noted are that, where, and that. Sorry, getting ahead of myself, sorry. Where, when, or whose, okay? But we also have that, which, or who, okay? That, which, or who, okay? And so you will, you'll see those coming up from time to time, okay? All right, so let me go back and reread this so that we can be on the same topic here. Okay, relative clauses start with a relative pronoun or with where, when, or whose. Charles Dickens is an author who is known for creative descriptions. Okay? So the relative pronoun is who. You can also say Dickens is an author whose descriptions are famous. You can also say cookies are a snack that she particularly enjoys. And you can also say one food which contains antioxidants is dark chocolate. So you can see these relative pronouns. Who, whose, or that, or which. Okay? All right. Notice that all of these sentences can be complete without the relative clause. You could say Charles Dickens is an author, or you could say Dickens is an author, or you could say cookies are a snack, or one food is dark chocolate. You could say all that, but it is much better to put this clause into the sentence so that your readers, A, won't get bored, and B, have a good idea of what you're talking about. Okay, so in an identifying clause, the relative pronoun is based on the common noun. The adjective clause is about. Let me read that again. In an identifying clause, the relative pronoun is based on the common noun the adjective clause is about. Okay, so remember, a common noun is something that is not a specific name of a place or person. Okay, so let's look at this. Charles Dickens is an author who is known for creative descriptions. Author is a common noun. Okay, so even though Charles Dickens is the author, anyone could be an author. Therefore, it's a common noun. Okay? We can also say Dickens is an author whose descriptions are famous. Or cookies are a snack that she particularly enjoys. Or one food which contains antioxidants is dark chocolate. Okay? So author, snack, and food, these are the common nouns. Who, whose, that, or which are the clauses, okay? All right, so notice how the clauses give additional information. Relative clauses start with a relative pronoun or with where, when, or whose, okay? You can say that is the store where I bought my phone, or Colorado is the state where I was born, or the 4th of July is the day when America celebrates its independence. Now, before we go too much further, let's stop and do a little bit of practice. I don't want you just sitting there listening to me. See if you can practice these a bit. Let me help you a bit. The first one, that is the store where I bought my phone. Instead of phone, why don't you substitute and say iPad? Go ahead, say it. Okay, that is the store where I bought my iPad. Good. Okay, so rather than store, why don't you say mall? Go ahead. Okay, that is the mall where I bought my phone, or that is the mall where I bought my iPad. Okay. How about going on to the next one? Colorado is the state where I was born. Why don't we change that to Eastern Province and place? Okay, go ahead, try it. Okay, Eastern Province is the place where I was born. Very good. And the 4th of July is the day when America celebrates its independence. Why don't we change it to September 23? Saudi Arabia celebrates National Day. Go ahead and try it. Okay, the 23rd of September is the day when Saudi Arabia celebrates National Day. Okay, very good. In an identifying clause, the relative pronoun is based on the common noun. The adjective clause is about. Let me read that again. In an identifying clause, the relative pronoun is based on the common noun the adjective clause is about. Okay. Here are some examples. That is the store where I bought my phone. Colorado is the state in which I was born. Or the 4th of July is the day when America celebrates its independence. Okay. Okay, so the first one, that is the store. Would you say that is the store who I bought my phone? No, of course not. You say where, because store is a place. Okay, so where and in which are similar. Okay, Colorado is the state in which I was born. You could also say where I was born, but we're going to use in which because it's good to change your language when you're writing. Don't use the same words over and over. So it's good to switch them if you can. All right, so obviously a state is a place, so we say in which, okay? Or the 4th of July is the day when America celebrates its independence. Now, day is related to time, right? And so if we're talking about time, we would say when, okay? It wouldn't make sense to say where, we need to say when. Okay. In a non-identifying clause, the relative pronoun is based on the common or proper noun the adjective clause is about. So we can see the same thing here. Charles Dickens, who is known for creative descriptions, is a famous author. Obviously, Charles Dickens is a person, so we say who. Okay? Dickens, whose descriptions are famous, wrote A Tale of Two Cities. Okay? Again, Dickens is a person, so we'll use whose. Now, the funny thing about whose is it can be used for people or for things. Okay? We'll talk about that a little bit later, though. Now, Oreos, which she particularly enjoys, are a delicious snack. Okay? Oreos is a thing, so we'll use which with Oreos. Dark chocolate, which contains antioxidants, is an even better snack. So dark chocolate, again, is a thing, so we'll use the word which with it. You could also use the word that with Oreos and dark chocolate. Which and that are basically interchangeable. In a non-identifying clause, the relative pronoun is based on the common or proper noun the adjective clause is about. Okay, here's an example. That store where I bought my phone has a good selection. Again, store and where go together. Colorado, where I was born, has a lot of mountains. Again, Colorado is a place, so we'll say where. The 4th of July, when America celebrates its independence, is a holiday in America. Okay? 4th of July is time, so we'll use when. Okay, so let's take a minute and I'd like for you just to do some informal practice. Okay, so why don't you do the third one for Eid? Okay, so you can say something like, give me a date. I don't know the date when Eid begins. I should, but so date when Saudi Arabia celebrates Hajj, or a date when Saudi Arabia celebrates Ramadan. Okay, go ahead and make a couple of sentences. Okay, I hope it sounded something like, you know, May 10 is the time when Saudi Arabia celebrates Eid, which is a holiday after Ramadan. Again, sorry, I don't know the exact dates for those, so you'll have to supply those. But it's always good to not just listen to me, but to practice a bit. So every time we do something, why don't you put this on pause and practice it a bit yourself? You can substitute some of the nouns for your own nouns and do some practicing. Okay, so let's go on. Non-identifying clauses have two differences from identifying clauses. They must have commas around them. So, my boss, who is from Kentucky, sometimes says, might, could. Okay? So, if you look at this right here, who is from Kentucky is the clause that we're talking about. It's a non-identifying clause, okay? It's non-identifying because you could say, my boss sometimes says might, could. But it's good to clarify, my boss, who is from Kentucky, sometimes says might, could. And that's important to the sentence because people in Kentucky have a slightly different use of the English language. If you're ever there, you will see or you will hear that people use English a little bit different. For a good example of the way some people in Kentucky speak, not all of them, but some of them, you can watch the that Pixar movie Cars, and Mater, the tow truck, is a character that sounds like he's from Kentucky. So if you ever want to experience what someone from Kentucky sounds like, watch the movie Cars and pay attention to Mater. Okay, so going on, they cannot use that as the relative pronoun. So here's how you should not say it. This book that was written by Charles Dickens is very long. Okay, so I mentioned before that and which can be interchangeable, but in this case, they are not interchangeable. So this book, which was written by Charles Dickens, is very long. Okay, so you cannot use that as the relative pronoun. Which has to be used as a relative pronoun. Okay, something to be careful of. The clause that does not always come directly after the noun it describes. Let me read that again. Something to be careful of. The clause does not always come directly after the noun it describes. Here's an example. That is the book about physics that I finished reading yesterday. The clause is about the book, not physics. Right? Or, she is the person with the problem who I was talking about. The clause is about the person, not the problem. Okay, so you notice that there are words between the noun and the clause which is describing it. Okay, you can do that. Okay. Here are two examples of how it can be done. Right? So just keep that in mind. All right, here's another example. Those are the cookies that I ate yesterday that were so delicious. We can have more than one clause about the same noun. The second clause is about the cookies, not yesterday. All right? So keep that in mind. You can have more than one clause per sentence, and here's a good example of how it's done. Okay, this means you need to decide what noun the clause is about before you decide which pronoun to use. Okay, so here's an example. She is the doctor at the hospital. Blank, I consulted yesterday. Okay, so you need to decide which pronoun you're going to put in there. Okay? Dr. Hamidi at Al-Hassa Hospital, blank, I consulted yesterday, said it was okay. So based on what we have studied so far, I'm going to give you an opportunity to decide which pronouns should go into those blanks. You have to choose who or whom or whose, or that or which. Okay? See if you can choose the correct one to go into those. Take a minute and read through it, and I'll give you a few seconds to decide. Okay, let's see the answers. Okay, in both cases, they chose the word who. Okay? She is the doctor at the hospital who I consulted yesterday. Okay? So obviously, it's the doctor that's being consulted, not the hospital. So you have to use a little bit of common sense and realize that you don't consult a hospital, you consult a doctor. Okay, the next one. Dr. Hamidi at Al-Hassa Hospital, who I consulted yesterday, said it was okay. Again, you can see here, we're using the proper noun, Dr. Hamidi, and that is a person. So we'll use the relative pronoun who. Again, it's not that hard to see, but you just have to use a little bit of common sense as you approach this. Okay, so let's try a couple more of those. She is a doctor at Al-Hassa Hospital, blank, I went yesterday. Okay. She is a doctor at the hospital, blank, I went yesterday. Okay, see if you can decide which relative pronoun goes into these blanks. I'll give you a few seconds to figure it out. Go ahead. Okay, so just a clue, the word went is important. Okay. All right, so here are the answers. All right, so yeah, she is a doctor at Al-Hassa Hospital, where I went yesterday. Okay, Al-Hassa Hospital is a place. So you will use the word where, because where refers to places. She is a doctor at the hospital where I went yesterday. Same thing. All right, so we talked about this already, but let's look at it in more detail. One odd thing is this. We only have whose to show possession. So we use it for everything, both people, places, animals, and things, everything. We use the word whose. Okay, so she is the teacher whose grammar presentations are helpful. Next, that is the cat whose tail is broken. And that car whose door is dented will be fixed tomorrow. Okay? So you can see that whose applies to all of them. Now, why don't you take a little bit of time and practice some of this, okay? So, like the first one, she is the teacher whose grammar presentations are helpful. Rather than using grammar, why don't you use the word math? Go ahead and say the sentence, please. Yes, she is the teacher whose math presentations are helpful. Okay. Right, how about this one? Number 2, the cat whose tail is broken. Rather than tail, why don't you say leg? Okay, so go ahead. Yeah, so that is the cat whose leg is broken. And the next one, why don't we say computer screen broken? Okay. Go ahead. That computer whose screen is broken will be fixed tomorrow. Okay. All right. So we have these other examples here. That is the table whose legs are uneven. And New York City, whose inhabitants are the most polite, is the center of America's publishing industry. Yeah, so I'm sure there are a lot of polite people in New York City. That's not the most common sentiment about New Yorkers. They actually have kind of the opposite reputation. Anyway, I guess that's not so important. Let's see if we can practice this a little bit. Number 1, that is the table whose legs are uneven. So why don't you substitute the word desk? Go ahead. Yeah, that is the desk whose legs are uneven. Rather than publishing industry, why don't we say fashion industry for New York City? Go ahead. Okay, yeah. New York City, whose inhabitants are the most polite, is the center of America's fashion industry. Okay. All right, so you need to decide if the clause is about the person, thing, or about something that belongs to or is part of the person or thing. Okay, let me read that again. You need to decide if the clause is about the person or thing, or something that belongs to or is a part of the person or thing. Okay. All right, so you will supply the pronoun for each of these sentences, okay? Determine whether it is about the person or about something that belongs to the person. Okay, he is the doctor, blank gives the best advice. Okay, he is the doctor, blank advice is the best. This is the table, blank I bought yesterday. This is the table, blank leg is loose. So is it about the person or is it about something that belongs to the person? Take a minute and add the pronouns. Go ahead. You will have a couple of possessive pronouns. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the answers. Here we go. He is the doctor who gives the best advice. So obviously, it's about the doctor, so we use who. All right, so next one. He is the doctor whose advice is the best. Okay, so it's about the advice, which is something that belongs to the doctor. So we'll use the word whose. And this is the table that I bought yesterday. So it's about table, so we use that. Okay, and this is the table whose leg is loose. Right. So we'll go ahead and use whose because it belongs to the table. Okay. All right. So let's do some more practice here. This is the desk. Blank is the messiest one in the office. You're going to have to add a pronoun there, okay, or a relative pronoun. And this is the chair. Blank seat is damaged. Add a pronoun or a clause. Yeah. For number one, also add a pronoun or a clause. Okay, number three, she is the teacher blank worksheet we are using. And number four, this worksheet blank I plan on using in class is good practice for pronouns. Okay, so let's do number one together. This is the desk, blank is the messiest one in the office. What do you think it should be? Okay, this is the desk, that is the messiest one in the office, right? Okay. Go ahead and do the other three yourself. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the answers. All right, so number one, this is the desk, that or which is the messiest one in the office. Okay, number two, this is the chair whose seat is damaged. Okay, number three, she is the teacher's whose worksheet we are using. Number four, this worksheet, which I plan on using in class, is good practice for pronouns. Okay. All right, so let's practice a couple of these right quick. So number two, rather than seat, why don't we use the word legs, L-E-G-S, legs. Go ahead and make a sentence with that. Go ahead. Yes, this is the chair whose legs are damaged, right? Since it's plural, you have to change is to are, right? All right. How about number three? Rather than worksheet, use the word book. Yeah. She is the teacher whose book we are using. All right. All right, so let's do one more. This worksheet, which I plan on using in class, is good practice for pronouns. All right, so rather than pronouns, why don't you say adjectives? Go ahead. Yeah, this worksheet, which I plan on using in class, is good practice for adjectives. All right. Here's another exercise. Okay, so number 5 is a little bit confusing. Danya is a person, and the cat belongs to her. So keep that in mind. Danya is the one blank, cat is very noisy. Okay. Number 6, Jonas Salk is the doctor blank discovered the polio vaccine. And number 7, Jonas Salk is the doctor blank polio vaccine helped many people. Okay, so put the clause or the relative pronoun into those blanks and we will check it. So I'll give you just a minute to work on it. Okay, I think you should have it by now. So here are the answers. Danya is the one whose cat is very noisy. Okay. Number 6, Jonas Salk is the doctor who discovered the polio vaccine. Number 7, Jonas Salk is the doctor whose polio vaccine helped many people. Okay, so let's practice some of these. Okay, so rather than cat, why don't you use the word cats, plural? Go ahead. Okay, you should say, Danya is the one whose cats are very noisy, right? Okay. Jonas Salk is the doctor who discovered the polio vaccine. Okay. Rather than doctor, why don't you use the word researcher? Maybe, sorry, rather than doctor, why don't you use the words medical researcher? Go ahead. Yes, you should say, Jonas Salk is the medical researcher who discovered the polio vaccine. And oh, that's fine. That's all the practice we need to do with that. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Another difficult aspect of relative clauses is when to use where versus that or which. Okay? Sometimes we are thinking of a place as the location where something happens. Someone is doing something where something is located, such as an adverb clause. Okay, so here are some examples of that. Okay? These are all where. We will talk about which on the next page. Okay, so Dubai is a city where I would like to live. Next, my room is a place where I go to be alone. Paris is the city where the Eiffel Tower is located. And France is a country where they make great cheese. Okay, so obviously Dubai is a place, so we'll use where. Room is a place, so we use where. Same for Paris and France. Okay. All right, so let's go on and look at how to use that or which. Okay, so another difficult aspect of relative clauses is when to use where versus that or which. But sometimes we are thinking of a place, a thing, such as when we are describing it or saying something about it, an adjective clause. Let me reread that. But sometimes we are thinking of a place, a thing, such as when we are describing it or saying something about it, adjective clause. Okay, so we're describing it. Okay, so Doha is a city that is clean and has nice buildings. You can see this is a description of Doha, right? Okay, so next one, Dubai, which many tourists like, is an expensive city. Okay. India as a country that has a large population. And India is a country which has a lot of poverty. Okay, so in this case, it's not really so important whether you use that or which. Okay. It's good that we have the option of using that or which, but what it does is it serves to make our writing more interesting. You don't want to keep reusing the same word over and over. So you have an option of switching it and using a different word. Okay. It's just as correct to say Dubai. Actually, no, it's not in that case. India is a country which has a large population, or that has a large population. Okay, which works better for this one in Dubai? So why is that? Well, it's just a stylistic choice, mostly. But anyway, let's practice some of these. Doha is a city that is clean and has nice buildings. Rather than saying Doha, why don't you say Muscat? Go ahead and make a sentence saying that. Yeah, Muscat is a city that is clean and has nice buildings. Okay. Rather than Dubai, why don't you say London? Go ahead. Yeah, London, which many tourists like, is an expensive city. Okay, let's go on to the next one. How can you choose between that, which, and where? Okay, so look at the clause. Does it have a subject? Okay, so San Francisco is a city, blank, has great weather. Does the underlined part, the clause, does it have a subject? Actually, no, it doesn't. Has great weather, okay? No subject there. So if the clause has no subject, you know that or which goes in the blank. Where cannot be the subject of a clause. So we would write, San Francisco is a city that has great weather. Since the clause has no subject in it, it has no noun or pronoun. Okay? How can you choose between that, which, and where? Look at the clause. Does it have a subject? Okay, so San Francisco is a city, blank, many tourists eat sourdough bread. Or San Francisco is a city, blank, many tourists want to visit. Okay? If it has a subject, you have to decide if the clause is something that happens in the place or is something about the place. Okay, so let's look here at the first one again. San Francisco is a city, blank, many tourists eat sourdough bread. Okay. Is it something that's happening there, or is it something that describes the place? Look at San Francisco is a city, blank, many tourists want to visit. Is it something that describes the place, or is it something that happens in the place? Okay, think about that and choose the right words to use there. Okay? Choose the right clauses to use there. Okay, we'll look at the answers now. Okay, San Francisco is a city, blank, many tourists eat sourdough bread. So eating sourdough bread is something they do while they are in the city. So use where. So San Francisco is a city where many tourists eat sourdough bread. Okay, so let's practice that a little bit. Rather than using San Francisco, why don't we use Dubai and tell me something that people do in Dubai? Well, tell me something that people eat in Dubai. Okay. Good. So I would say Dubai is a city where many tourists eat Indian food. There's a lot of Indian food in San Francisco. Okay, so, sorry, not San Francisco, in Dubai. Okay, so try again. This time tell me about Dubai like this and use your favorite food. Okay, yeah. Dubai is a city where many tourists eat pizza. Dubai is a city where many tourists eat burgers. Okay, something like that. Okay, so how can you choose between that, which, and where? Okay, so in our example, San Francisco is a city blank many tourists want to visit. Okay. So that tourists want to visit is telling us about the city, so use that or which. So San Francisco is a city that many tourists want to visit. So it's telling us about the city. It's describing the city itself, okay? So we use the word that. All right, so do the same sentence, say it out loud, only use Dubai this time. Go ahead. Okay, yes, Dubai is a city that many tourists want to visit. Okay, so should we use that, which, or where? Okay, so go ahead. Mecca is the place blank Muhammad was born. Or New York City sorry, New York is a city, blank is known as Big Apple. Okay, go ahead and supply the right clauses here. Okay, so let's go ahead and have a look at the answers. Mecca is the place where Muhammad was born. Okay, this happened in Mecca. Or New York is a city that is known as the Big Apple. Okay, so this is telling something about New York. All right. Should we use that, which, or where? Okay, so here we go. China is a country, blank has a large population. So that, which, or where, decide for yourself. Or China is the country, blank, the hidden city is located. Okay, so go ahead and choose that, which, or where. All right, let's have a look at the answer. Okay, China is a country that has a large population. This is telling something about China. Or China is the country where the hidden city is located. This is something located in China. Okay, so practice where versus that. Okay. They want to go to Paris because it's a city, blank has a lot of museums. This is the store, blank, I bought my new jacket. Medina is a city, blank, has a famous mosque. My neighborhood is a place, blank, doesn't have any public transportation. And my neighborhood is a place, blank, many new businesses have opened. Okay, so take a minute and decide whether you should write where or that in each sentence. Put it on pause if you can and take a minute. Okay, we'll go ahead and go on. Okay, here we go. They want to go to Paris because it's a city that has a lot of art museums. Okay. This is the store where I bought my new jacket. Medina is a city that has a famous mosque. My neighborhood is a place that or which doesn't have any public transportation, and my neighborhood is a place where many new businesses have opened. Okay, so practice, find the noun the clause is about and choose the correct relative pronoun. Okay, she is the writer, blank, book won a prize. Okay, so May 16th is the day, blank, I flew to America. We have an article this week, blank is about economics. This is the presentation, blank helps you practice relative pronouns, and August and September are the months blank the school year usually starts. So let's do the first one together. She is the writer whose book won a prize, right? Because it's talking about the person, in this case, the pronoun she, okay? All right, go ahead and do 2 through 5 yourself. Take a minute, maybe put it on pause. Okay, let's go ahead and have a look. Yeah, she is a writer whose book. Okay, May 16 is the day when. We have an article this week, which or that. This is the presentation that helps you practice, and August and September are the months when, okay? All right, practice identify if a clause is identifying or non-identifying. Okay, this is the time blank you should study a lot. The 1920s blank was a time blank. Many social changes happened in an interesting decade. Sorry. The 1920s blank was a time blank. Many social changes happened is an interesting decade. And students blank are known for procrastinating, need better time management strategies. Okay, so go ahead and put this on pause if you can. Take a minute and supply the right clause. All right, let's look at the answers. This is the time when you should study a lot. This is identifying. Okay. The 1920s, which was a time when many social changes happened, is an interesting decade. It's non-identifying, and students who are known for procrastinating need better time management strategies. That's non-identifying, right? Okay, here's another practice. Identify if a clause is identifying or non-identifying. So, John Nash blank is an economist, is the person. Blank, the film A Beautiful Mind was based on. Number 2, Ron Howard is the director. Blank, film A Beautiful Mind won several Academy Awards. Okay, go ahead and put it on pause and choose the right clause to write in the blanks. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the answers. Yeah, John Nash, who is an economist, is the person who the film A Beautiful Mind was based on. So this is identifying and non-identifying. Okay, it has 2 clauses, and one is identifying, one is non-identifying. Number 2, Ron Howard is the director whose film A Beautiful Mind won several Academy Awards. This is identifying. So, practice. Identify if a clause is identifying or non-identifying. Commas have been removed. Add them where needed. Okay, so going to have to add some commas here. They have to go to Al Hassa Hospital. Blank, the blank, the specialty lab is located. Let me read that again. They have to go to Al Hassa Hospital. Blank, the specialty lab is located. Number 2, we need a clock. Blank keeps accurate time. And number 3, the store is located in a place. Blank has a lot of public transportation. Okay, so go ahead and add the commas, the clauses, and tell whether it's identifying or non-identifying. Put it on pause if need be. Okay, and here are the answers. Okay, they have to go to Al Hospital where the specialty lab is located. It's a non-identifying. And you had to add a comma after hospital, right? Number 2, we need a clock that or which keeps accurate time. That's identifying. And the store is located in a place that or which has a lot of public transportation. That is identifying. Okay, another one. Identify if a clause is identifying or non-identifying. Commas have been removed. Add them where needed. Okay, so my friend Louise blank is very kind and generous. Let me stay with her last summer. Number 5, paraphrasing is a skill. Blank is very difficult for our students. Okay, so again, add the correct clauses and tell whether it's identifying or non-identifying. Add commas if need be. Okay, go ahead. Okay, let's look at the answers. My friend Louise, who is very kind and generous, let me stay with her last summer. It's non-identifying, and you added 2 commas after Louise and generous. Okay, paraphrasing is a skill that or which is very difficult for our students. That is identifying. Okay, so finally, you cannot delete the relative pronoun in a non-identifying clause. So do not do it this way. You cannot say, I share an office with Miss Lorna is good at teaching writing. It doesn't make sense. So you need to say, I share an office with Miss Lorna who is good at teaching writing. And that is the end. Thank you for your attention, and I'll see you in a future session.